Who is a Muslimah? What makes her unique? Where is her story? I'm here to shed light on voices of powerful Muslim women who are a mystery to the media. My name is Noor Hewaidi and you're listening to Muslimah Demystified. Salam everyone. Today we're talking about Muslim women in science with a biochemist from UCL's Institute of Child Health in London. Welcome, Aziza.
Hello.
So as of last week, you are now Dr. Aziza. How does it feel to hear that?
I'm actually very relieved.
Yeah?
It's been a very long process.
Oh,
so now I'm kind of like, I'm basking in it.
That's amazing. So can you tell us, what is it that you do? What do you specialize in?
So my PhD was primarily a biochemistry degree.
Okay.
But what my main focus was on epilepsy, specifically drug-resistant epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, epilepsy affects about 1 in 100 people in the UK, and every 1 in 3 epilepsy patients are drug-resistant. So that means you give them 2, 3, 4 drugs, and their seizures don't stop.
What inspired this interest in epilepsy?
To be honest, it was actually pure chance. It's kind of serendipitous. So after I finished my my master's degree, I was kind of like job hunting and whatnot.
That'll be me soon, by the way. Almost done my master's, and
it'll be much more exciting than my job hunting phase.
We'll see. Don't hold your breath.
Yeah. But yeah, I just came across it, and I looked at the description. They'd already had sort of a rough idea of what the project was going to be about, and coincidentally it happened to include some of the stuff that I did in my master's degree. So I thought, I'm just going to go for it. I wasn't necessarily intending to do a PhD at the time, but I thought, why not? Probably not the way intentions, but...
So, reflecting on the point that you're at right now, looking back, you've achieved a PhD, mashallah, a master's, an undergrad, etc. What was a driving factor in getting you through all this hard work? Because surely learning about these sorts of issues and health, it's heavy. So what pushed you through?
To be honest, I think I've just always had an interest in science. So from a young age, I've always enjoyed it.
What do you enjoy about it?
It's kind of like puzzle work, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the interesting thing about research is you've got a question you don't really know the answer to, and it is basically a puzzle. You have to try and figure out what the answer is. Scientific research, you've got lots of little bits of information. So you might know that, let's say, this drug does one thing in this system and it does another thing in another system, etc. So you kind of have to piece it all together.
Right.
From my PhD specifically was very experimental based. So it's quite fun being able to say, okay, we know that it does this, this, and this. What happens if we do this? I mean, the ultimate goal is to find answers to these big questions. People are affected by these diseases every day. It could affect you, or it could affect your family member. So I think that's kind of, it's a long and complicated way of doing it, but you're kind of contributing to society that way.
So in your field, in your environment, would you say you're surrounded by many Muslim women?
Not really, no. No.
Okay, and why would you encourage Muslim girls and women to pursue science or research of this sort?
I think there's a lot of reasons why Muslim women and Muslims in general should contribute. First of all, when there's a field that's overrepresented by a specific group, you end up the research output. It's not just in science. It could be in anything, engineering, mathematics, or even beyond STEM entirely.
Yeah.
But you end up having a body of employees who think the same way, who function in the same way, because they all come roughly from the same background,
from similar experiences, give or take.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, from a Muslim background or minority background, you could potentially offer a perspective that other people have never really considered. I think also if we want to be heard, we have to be a bit more visible, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
we need to contribute in as many ways as possible. And it's kind of annoying that the onus is on us. But unless we want to normalize Muslims in media or in society, we kind of have to be out there. And unfortunately, that's kind of the reality at the moment.
I guess this leads back to an interesting question, which is it that not enough Muslims are pursuing this field, or is it that they're being systematically or institutionally filtered out for many reasons? So it's definitely something to think about. So Aziza is the founder of an incredible NGO called the Omni Institute. So can you tell us a little more about what this institute does?
So Omnis essentially is a platform for young people, young leaders, to, I guess, amplify their voices. Because one of the main issues, I think, in society and in politics is that we have these people who have to make decisions for us, or not necessarily have to make, they make the decisions for us, and they don't take our voices into account. And quite often when you're young or when you're a woman, and especially if you're a minority, and you're like all three of those, your voices are just completely ignored. You're not you're not able to contribute to the system because no one actually pays any attention to you, even if you do try.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the idea with Omnis was we decided to create a system through which we could help young people, leaders from underrepresented communities, women as well, especially rather, to really sort of train them to become excellent leaders. They're already amazing leaders, but to become sort of even more visible, to get their voices out there, and to help them in their communities. But the main objective is basically trying to to amplify the voices of already empowered but not recognized leaders. And everyone is a leader, essentially. We just kind of need to get you out there.
That's awesome. And I like how you use amplify their voices and not give them voices, because they do have voices. They're just not heard.
No, exactly. It's a bit patronizing to say that, we're going to go and empower women, or we're going to empower minorities, etc. Because quite often these people already have agency. They already have their own voices.
Yeah.
By us coming in and saying we're going to empower you, we strip them of that agency. So we don't want to do anything like that. And that's the main mistake that a lot of Western and international NGOs have done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where they go into communities in the global south, for example, and they come in with that sort of Western perspective of, we're going to teach you, or we're going to empower you.
Yeah.
Which is the complete, it's the wrong attitude to go by.
And that's why it's always important to reflect upon yourself and your position to an issue, your relationship with it, and your relationship with others, even with people that you want to help. It's really important to reflect upon that, because sometimes you can do more harm than good, even with good intentions. So it matters to consider these things. What inspired you to... How did this all begin? What inspired you with Omni Institute?
I don't know, actually. I was going to sound really silly. So I don't know. I do know. It's just kind of... when
I
lots
just
of things
sort of
come
got
together.
a PhD, just sort of started an NGO.
I was bored. No, that wasn't it.
It was a Saturday afternoon. It was raining outside.
Why not? No, so I have two very good friends, Christina and Ella, who are both really amazing people and have done amazing things in their careers. And I guess a lot of it was kind of born out of conversations with them. When we talk about politics and society and leadership, and, we recognise that there was a gap there, that, that these systems, stakeholders, if you want to call them, are starting to recognise the need to involve local people and local leaders, but they don't really know how to, and they still go about it the wrong way. And all three of us, we've kind of, essentially, we come from a sort of position of privilege. We've been very fortunate in our lives. We've got, qualifications and we've had experiences and opportunities that other people might not have had.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like the best way for us to kind of give back to other people.
Yeah.
And to help them achieve what they want to achieve. So it kind of did happen on a sort of random afternoon in London. Yeah, rainy afternoon. But yeah,
I love
how
it.
was born.
And what have you learned about giving back? What does it mean to amplify voices? Because I guess that's something I'm navigating how to do, not only in my career, but, with projects like this, with a podcast. That's something you're doing in your field. What does it mean? What have you learned from that? How do you amplify voices?
I think one of the most important things is we need to listen.
Okay, yeah.
We need to listen to what people actually want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of different. I know how you mentioned earlier on, we may have the best of intentions but can cause more harm. I think sometimes that occurs because we go in with a perceived idea of what we think they need.
Yeah,
so that's I think it is a lot about listening, communicating, and giving them the opportunity to say what they want. So, for example, we've got a project lined up in Colombia, hopefully this summer.
Oh, amazing.
And we're planning on basically running a workshop program for, I think, about 4 leaders, local leaders, in a very rural part of Colombia. And these 4 leaders are amazing. They've all done completely different things to help their communities. And they've got no support from the government. They've got no support from financially either. They're doing this out of their own pocket and out of their own time because they just want to improve their communities. Mm-hmm. So the workshop program itself is completely tailored to their needs. And we've spoken to them. We communicate with them quite often. And through that, we're developing a program that fits what they want. So they've said what they wanted, the kind of things that they feel like they're lacking. And through that, I think if you can create a sort of personalised approach to the programme, we're hoping that they'll benefit from it massively, much more than if we came in and said, okay, this is what we think you should learn.
That doesn't work.
I mean, it's kind of, we don't want to have that sort of, top-down approach, if that makes sense. We're kind of coming in from the top, swooping in. We want them to be as involved as possible and to really have a say in what they need and what they want. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that way as well, they can feel a bit more fulfilled from the program itself. Listening. I mean, it's a very difficult skill.
Yeah.
Listening and actually listening to what people want.
Actively listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like how you said, it started with a conversation. You seem to be surrounded by a network of amazing women. I saw you casually tagged on Facebook in a dinner with Malala and Dr. Ala Murabat. What have you learned from these Muslim women that you're around? What have they taught you? And how okay, sorry, I'm not going to ask a double-barreled question, so let's start with that one. What have you learned from them?
From being surrounded by amazing people? A lot of things.
Leaders.
I do think it goes down to the listening thing, and that's, quite often, like I mentioned before, we come from privileged positions, and I easily forget that. Yeah. And it's very easy to look at things from a certain perspective, certain point of view. So being surrounded by these amazing people, you engage in a lot of dialogue about certain issues, and it really does make you think, am I thinking about things the wrong way? Am I looking at things from a Western perspective or from a privileged perspective? So I think to be a better leader, you do need to listen and to also consider your position carefully. Mm-hmm. Maybe do a bit more research. It's kind of one of those things that you can't really, I don't know, I can't really put into words exactly, but I feel like I'm much more careful about the way I look at things, the way I think about things.
Yeah.
More considerate of the other issues around me because, it's easy to be like, well, I'm a minority. I suffer in this way, but there are other people who suffer in different ways.
Exactly.
So that's one thing.
Yeah, and that's something I relate to as a social researcher. I mean, reflexivity is a big part of what we do before we enter the field and enter our research, is thinking about, again, who you are in your life. So, for example, as someone who is a Muslim, a woman, an immigrant, I have a lot in common with minority communities, quote unquote. But at the same time, I'm an insider in that sense, but I'm an outsider in the sense that, I'm doing this for research, so I get to walk away with knowledge while I may have not necessarily, impacted their direct lives. I come obviously from a position of privilege where I get to do this in the first place, to be a researcher, to be educated. That level of, cultural capital, I would say. So it's important to not, you think you know who you are, but reflexivity is a process, and you really need to look inwards before you try to fix what's around you. I think that's so important, and it's such a forgotten aspect of empowering others and bettering your community. I'm glad that you brought that to the forefront, because we take who we are for granted, and we forget our place.
We forget very easily, though. And, I think it as well, it kind of makes you a better person. And hopefully through that self-reflection and really, a lot of introspection, you can empathize a bit more with other people and understand them a bit. But like you said, it's a work in progress. And I don't think it should stop. I don't think you'll ever get to a point where, okay, this is it. I know who I am, and that's that. I think it'll always change through life, and hopefully, as you experience more things, you look at things slightly differently each time.
Yeah, and there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
So I guess let's flip the coin a little bit to end this lovely conversation. What advice would you give to a young Muslimah who wants to one day be a scientist? What do you say to her?
To be a scientist, I say just go for it. So one of the things that's affected me throughout most of my youth, and it still affects me now, is I've always been very afraid of failure. And I think this applies to any career. Yeah. It doesn't have to be science, it could be anything. And this is only something I've learned recently, and this is something I picked up from being surrounded by amazing people. The thing that I could point out that distinguishes me and someone who I would consider successful, like for example Allah, is that.
Do you want to tell people who Allah is, just because we've referenced her a couple times?
Yeah, we've mentioned.
Who is this mysterious Allah?
Context. So Allah is a super fantastic, I don't know what you could call her, like a superhero, basically.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe her. She works as a women's rights activist. She's a UN high-level commissioner for health and economic... Is it health and economic employment? Health, yeah, something like that. Sorry. I should know this. She advocates for sustainable development goals.
And she's a fellow Libyan.
She's also a fellow Libyan, yeah. And she's also a co-founder with myself and Christina of Omni Institute. So she's a super fantastic, amazing superhero woman.
Yeah, amazing Muslimah.
But it's something that I noticed quite recently, actually, just from having random conversations with her. And one thing that she does that I realise I don't do, and I should do, is that when I have an idea, I dismiss it too quickly.
Yeah.
I back down. I have an idea and I think, oh, this is great. And then I think, nah, I can't do it. So I give up too quickly. I'm afraid of failure.
Yeah, and lots of us are.
I don't. Yeah, I think it's something that everyone is probably prone to doing. That we back down very easily, and quite often it's because of ourselves, our own self-conviction. We're not confident enough to do these things, and that applies to career, applies to relationships, applies to literally anything.
And I think it's not even just a lack of confidence, but it's our perception of failure as a bad thing. I think that failure is necessary. I think failure is inevitable, and it's part of any journey. Any journey worth doing entails failure, and failure is a turning point, and that's what it is. Because once you hit rock bottom, you have to go up. There's nowhere else to go. And you come up with your best ideas.
It's a learning process.
Yeah.
But I think that's true. Yeah, we're all too afraid of failing, I guess.
Yeah. How do you overcome that fear of failure as a scientist?
Well, funnily enough, my PhD involved lots of failures. And that's something that happens in pretty much every PhD. And I imagine even in some research master's degrees.
Yeah.
Basically, if you don't fail, then you're super, super, super lucky. And then you get used to it. A lot of it is resilience, and quite often you make that mistake, or it's not, with science it's not mistakes. Sometimes things just don't work.
Yeah.
And when you're doing an experiment, 9 times out of 10 it's not going to work the first time you do it. And you won't know why, but part of the process is trying to figure out how to avoid that. So, the experiment has failed. You don't just cry and, sit in a corner and weep.
Yeah.
But you get back up and you just think, okay, what can I change this time? And I think that's, like you said, it's a process. You have to fail to be a better scientist.
Yeah.
You have to fail to know how to think, how to approach every problem. And the more you get used to failure, the better you are at avoiding it and also fixing problems when they occur.
Yeah.
A lot of these things kind of overlap.
Yeah, you have to fail to be a better scientist, and you have to fail to be a better person. So I think your lab very much is a metaphor for life.
It is, yeah. The amount of failure I've gone through. But hey, now I've succeeded at last.
Exactly.
I like to think I've succeeded.
And you're on Muslimah Demystified.
Yes.
That's the name of my podcast, by the way.
First step
in case you didn't catch that. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Aziza, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I'm very glad that you invited me.
Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. I hope it inspires our listeners today.
Brilliant.
Thanks for listening in, everyone. Again, my name is Noor Hewaidi, and I invite you to sit with me in future episodes of Muslimah Demystified. Salam.